Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into an important and rapidly developing piece of news that many of you are watching closely. Reports that Russia has halted an attack, with strikes aborted and aircraft returning urgently to base, a situation that has significant implications for the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and for global geopolitics. Now, let's unpack what this means, why it's happening, and what it could signal for the future of the war that has dragged on for years. To begin with, this report that Russia abruptly halted an attack and struck aircraft were called back comes from recent video and social media coverage suggesting that certain Russian offensive actions were aborted at the last minute, and what was planned as an escalation did not proceed as initially expected. These videos show aircraft landing urgently instead of continuing an assault, which has sparked intense speculation about internal decision-making within the Russian military. This development does not happen in isolation, but against a broader backdrop of intense fighting, diplomatic pressure, and shifting strategies on both sides. This news comes amidst a persistent and often brutal conflict that began with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 and has since seen countless missile and drone strikes on Ukrainian cities, energy infrastructure, and civilian targets, as well as Ukrainian counter-operations inside Russian territory. Throughout the war, both sides have engaged in cycles of escalation and pauses, often linked to diplomatic efforts, and sometimes those pauses have been fragile or short-lived. The current report of attacks being aborted may reflect one of these uneasy moments. To understand why this reported halt is significant, we need to explore the dynamics of the Russia-Ukraine conflict right now. Over the past weeks and months, there has been intense fighting and diplomatic activity around possible ceasefires or peace deals, involving not just Ukraine and Russia, but also Western countries. Recently, leaders from the UK and France signed a declaration pledging support for Ukraine under a peace deal framework, including security guarantees and potentially even allied forces stationed in Ukraine should a ceasefire hold. This represents a major shift in involvement from European nations and highlights how the conflict's dynamics are not static. They are profoundly influenced by diplomatic negotiations and shifting alliances. The Wall Street Journal, at the same time, peace talks remain extremely complicated. Even as proposals for ceasefires are discussed, both sides have continued military actions, drone strikes, missile raids, and claims of violations. For instance, just in the last week or so, Russia reported a Ukrainian drone strike in Russian-occupied territory that allegedly killed dozens, which Russia cited to push back against peace negotiations. Ukraine has denied responsibility for some of those claims, further muddying the waters and eroding trust. The Guardian, considering this context, what does an aborted attack signify? First, it could indicate internal Russian debates or uncertainties among Russia's military leadership or political leadership about the timing or wisdom of a particular offensive. Escalating the war further at a time when diplomatic negotiations and international pressure are high can carry major strategic risks, including increased sanctions or deeper foreign involvement. Alternatively, pausing an attack might be a tactical decision aimed at recalibrating military operations, gathering better intelligence, or avoiding unintended escalation with Ukraine's Western backers. Another angle to consider is that wars are not just fought with weapons on the ground, but also with perceptions and narratives. Announcing or broadcasting that strikes were halted can be part of a strategic messaging effort by Russian state media or authorities, aimed at signaling restraint to the international community or undermining confidence in Ukrainian defenses. Whether this is a genuine operational halt or partly psychological warfare is something analysts will be watching closely. It's also worth remembering that this is not the first time pauses or ceasefire agreements have been discussed during this war. Earlier in the conflict, there were efforts to halt strikes on energy infrastructure, a sector that has suffered heavily on both sides, which were tied to diplomacy, particularly efforts led by outside mediators like the United States. These discussions included proposals for limited pauses in attacks to build trust, though such agreements were fragile and sometimes breached. The Moscow Times so, in this case, when we hear that an attack was halted or aborted, it may reflect a momentary shift in momentum, influenced not only by battlefield realities, but also by global diplomatic pressures, including sanctions, negotiation efforts, and public opinion internationally. Western governments have increasingly been emphasizing the importance of a negotiated end to hostilities, even while continuing to supply Ukraine with defensive military support, a balancing act that creates complex incentives for both sides. Another key factor to consider is how unpredictable war can be. Battlefield plans are fluid. Weather conditions, intelligence updates, supply issues, or even diplomatic backchannels can prompt last-minute changes in operational orders. Halting an attack at the 11th hour may simply reflect new intelligence or uncertainties about potential consequences. We also should place this in the broader timeline of activities reported around the war's continuation. For example, there have been renewed large-scale drone and missile attacks by both sides entering the new year, underscoring that even as diplomatic efforts are underway, military operations are ongoing. Russia was reported to have launched more than 200 drones at Ukraine in early January, while Ukraine's defenses intercepted many of them. The Times of India, and yet, despite these brutal engagements, there are continuing diplomatic efforts, peace proposals, and discussions of security frameworks involving Western allies that are shaping how both Ukraine and Russia respond to battlefield opportunities and pressures. Leaders from the US, UK, France, and other European nations have been working to lay out potential frameworks for ending hostilities and providing guarantees to Ukraine's security. These discussions are influencing strategic decisions on the ground, including, perhaps, decisions to pause attacks or to reconsider military plans. The Guardian, the human impact of these pauses or halted strikes also matters deeply. For civilians in Ukraine and even in Russia, pauses can mean temporary relief from bombardments or an opportunity to regroup and rebuild amid ongoing hardships. But when such pauses are only temporary or conditional, the uncertainty can weigh heavily on ordinary people's lives, disrupting their ability to plan, rebuild, or feel safe. From a military analysis standpoint, if Russia truly is reconsidering certain offensive actions, it might be a sign that their broader strategic goals are adjusting, possibly due to mounting international pressure, internal casualties, economic strain from sanctions, or shifts in leadership objectives. For Ukraine, any pause in hostilities could provide a much-needed window to strengthen defenses, secure more international support, and push forward with diplomatic engagements. We should also be cautious not to overinterpret a single piece of media or an isolated report. In conflicts like this, misinformation and contested narratives are common. Both sides frequently accuse each other of fabricating events or spinning stories to their advantage. Independent verification from multiple reliable sources is essential before drawing firm conclusions. In conclusion, the report that Russia halted an attack and aborted strikes, with aircraft returning urgently, could indicate a moment of strategic recalibration, diplomatic tension, or operational challenges within the broader Russo-Ukrainian war context. It highlights how fluid and unpredictable warfare can be, especially when intertwined with intense diplomatic efforts and global geopolitical pressures. Ultimately, whether this pause leads to something more lasting, such as a ceasefire or meaningful negotiations, remains to be seen. But it adds another complex chapter to a conflict that continues to shape global politics and impact millions of lives. Thanks so much for watching and staying informed with us today. With how fast events are unfolding, we'll continue to monitor updates and break things down for you right here on the channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned for more in-depth coverage.